Hey everybody, we are starting Unit 2, Population and Migration. So for this first objective, we're looking at population distribution and density. So we're right here at the very beginning, quite a bit to cover for this particular unit. Let's take a look at the objectives and essential learning before we begin. So first, we're going to be looking at factors that influence distribution of population and looking at how that might differ at different scales. This includes physical features and how that influences population distribution, as well as other factors that can influence that scale of analysis. Also, defining and explaining differences between methods of measuring and calculating population density. So first, where is population distributed? So if we take a look at this map here, we can see where we have higher density populations. And somewhat recently, we reached 8 billion human population, which is pretty incredible. When I first started teaching this, we were way down at 7 billion. So if we look at the different clusters of population, first we have East Asia, focused right over here. We can see, that deep red and purple. South Asia, notably India and Bangladesh. Southeast Asia as well. So if we take a look at some of the areas here, notice that they are a lot of island nations, and those are very high density. And then, of course, Western Europe as well. So in terms of factors that influence the distribution of population, we have natural, environmental, or physical geographic factors. So first, people don't typically settle in the 5 twos, as in places that are too hot, too cold, too wet, too hilly, or too dry. In general, we see trends where people are most likely to settle in lower elevations, especially areas that have fertile soil or arable land, typically more so in temperate climates, and very often near bodies of water. So if we take a look at this term right here, ecumene, these are habitable areas of the world. So not every part of the globe that we have here is conducive to settling, or as easily conducive to settling. So in terms of factors that influence this distribution of natural, environmental, and physical, let's take a look at this map of Australia. So here we have a topographic map. Right here we have a dot density map. 1 dot equals 1,000 people. So we can see these general trends here, right? Some of these differences where we see most of the population hugging the coast, and then quite a bit avoiding some of the more difficult terrain right here in the middle. In terms of other factors that influence distribution of population, namely its economic, social, cultural, as well as political. And for calculating population density, we have a few measurements here. So this first one is arithmetic. That's total population divided by total land area, which is square miles in this example, or square kilometers, whatever unit of preference is fine. On the AP exam, you'll probably see miles. Physiological, which is total population divided by the amount of arable land, or the amount of land that is farmable. And then also agricultural population density, and that is the number of farmers divided by the amount of arable land. So taking a look at arithmetic first. So arithmetic, this is probably the most generic, general way to measure population density. Sorry, there's Addie coming around again. This is, kind of a catch-all. However, the thing that you do need to keep in mind is that it does not account for uneven distribution within a country. It's just a general number. So despite the fact, for instance, we just saw that map of Australia, we see very concentrated clusters of where population is and vast areas that are generally unpopulated. This is just a catch-all number. So it's going to assume an even distribution, even though that is always not the case. So here's another example. So in terms of calculating population density, how does our understanding of population distribution and density change when we change the scale of analysis? So, that's kind of the key term to remember here. So 94% of China's population lives in the eastern region, so right around here. So if we look at this population density map, and then compare it here to this topographic map, right? We see that big difference, and we can see the terrain here is just not nearly as easy to have to go through to build infrastructure in and so on. However, when we do look at an arithmetic measure of density, this is at a national scale, right? So it just assumes an even distribution, even though in reality that definitely is not the case. Next, we have physiological. So physiological is total population divided by arable land. So as I said earlier, not all areas are conducive to agriculture and conducive to farming. So this takes into account that amount of land that actually is. And what this does is it reveals a little bit about the carrying capacity of that area. So another great term for you all to know. This is the maximum population size that can be supported by the available resources without damaging the environment or using natural resources unsustainably. So this kind of gives you a little peek into that particular factor. However, we do have global trade, right? So even if there might not be that much arable land, food can be imported or agricultural products can be imported. So in terms of an example, so how does our understanding of population distribution and density change when we use physiological density? So the example that we have here is Egypt. These are numbers from 2020. So the arithmetic population density, so that overall general population density is 257. Physiological, it's 9,182. So the most notable thing here is if we look at where population is, notice it hugs the Nile River. So 95% of Egypt's population lives along the Nile River. That's significant. That's only 3% of the total land that they have. So in terms of what that says about the physical environment of Egypt, we see that a lot of it is uninhabited, right? And then that also has implications. If we think about it, a lot of this is desert landscape. The Nile does provide fertile soil. So this can tell you a lot about that difference between arithmetic and physiological, especially when looking at scales of analysis. And then finally, we have agricultural population density. So this gives you a little bit of insight into the economic development, not exactly population distribution. This is the number of farmers divided by the amount of arable land. So if we look here, we can see the darker green means that they have more farmers per square unit of arable land. So ultimately, the insight that this is providing is that lower or less developed countries, LDCs, they tend to have lower levels of technology. They don't have as much machinery and to be able to help them with their farming. So that means a lot of their farming is very labor intensive, done by hand, and the output is lower. Takes a lot more time, a lot more effort, a lot more energy, whereas more developed countries tend to have a lot of mechanization, so they don't need as many farmers. So again, this is more so about the economic development of that particular population group. So as we can see here, taking a look at these two, a picture that's from a less developed country and one from a more developed country, hand farming versus mechanized farming, much faster, much more efficient, whereas this is slower and just less output. So factors, let's take a look at economic. So economic factors can absolutely influence where people live. Job opportunities, access to natural resources, those are very compelling economic reasons. So in this example here in Serbia, I believe this is pronounced as Norliska. Way up here in the north, in a generally uninhabited area, is now inhabited because they have a lot of nickel deposits. So being able to harvest that natural resource is a very compelling economic reason for companies to set up areas there and then for people to go for those job opportunities. For social cultural, Elements that can influence this is housing availability, also safety. Safety is a big one. If an area is considered safe for people to live, especially people with families, they'll tend to want to be there. Access to transportation, feelings of belonging and community are also very compelling reasons for where people might decide to live. Political reasons, also housing availability. Sorry, I think that glitched there. For political reasons, we see housing availability, safety, access to transportation, a feeling of belonging and community again. But if we think about it in a political sense versus a social cultural sense, we see the role of governmental policies at play when looking at it through this lens. So that is all for this first objective of Unit 2, Population and Migration. I will see you guys in the next one.